Hello, good morning, good morning. Ooh, good to see all your faces. Yeah. So, many of you know that I just returned from a little vacation, and I talked a little bit about it last week. And, I think one of the best things about going on vacation is that you get to meet people from different places. You get to see how different people live. And sometimes they live very differently than you do. And normally, you might have some judgments around that. But because you're traveling and you're kind of outside of your normal routines, you're outside of your normal patterns, you're no longer surrounded by, what makes you comfortable, you're a little more open to new things, to try new things, to meet new people. At least for most travelers, this is true. There's some people that like to kind of take their armchair with them. And, like if you do a cruise, right, you're always sleeping in the same bed. You're surrounded by environments that you're used to. You're eating the same food that you used to. You're returning back to the same cabin every night, so there's not much of a stretch there. But on the whole, most people who travel are ready to explore a new experience, new cultures, new foods, new ways of being. And that helps open us to connect with people who think differently than us, people who live differently than us. Have you noticed, if you travel? Yeah. And that's a good thing, because we can tend to get kind of stuck in our little boxes of comfort and have the same opinions that we've developed for a while and think the same thoughts that we've thought over and over. Some people live the same day over and over again. And you tend to connect only with people who think like you, and you watch the same things and read the same things, and you get stuck in this silo. And then there's other people over here who are surrounded by people who think like them. And they watch the same programs and read the same things. And they're stuck in their little silos. And this has become a huge problem, as we know. So today I want to talk about how we can break out of our little boxes and try something different. Be open to something different. And maybe ask ourselves, how can I consciously connect with somebody who thinks differently than me? Somebody who lives different than I do? Because, it's not normally our first instinct to do that. It's not something that comes easy to us, right? But we live in a time where differences of opinion can solidify and turn into walls of division really quickly. We see this in our country. We see this in other places in the world. We see this in our communities. Sometimes we see it in our own families. How many of you have been to a family gathering, maybe extended family gathering, and you're having a good time, and then suddenly someone voices a really strong opinion, and the energy of the room changes? It's like, who's going to speak next? And whether it's politics or it's religion, or maybe it was during COVID, there was a lot of strong opinions during COVID. And now suddenly there's no space for love anymore. There's only space to prove you're right. And then that just creates a division. And maybe, it's somebody that you feel like, well, I just can't be around that person anymore. I can't even talk to that person on the phone anymore. Anybody had that experience? I know I have. Right? But what we know deep down here is that we are spiritual beings first and foremost. We're spiritual beings first and foremost. And beneath all of the opinions and differences, and beyond all of the coagulated thoughts, there is the divine presence within everyone. Within everyone. And it is the same divine presence that is within us. Right? And that divine presence is bigger than our opinions. It's bigger than our differences. It's even bigger than this current time that we're living in. Oh, it is bigger. Yeah, thank God, right? Thank God for that. We can lean into that. Lean into this idea that this divine presence is bigger. So I remember when I first came here, it must have been about 2010, 2009 or something, a while back now. I'm looking back going, God, it was really that long ago? And we, had just moved the whole family from Los Angeles, and we moved here, and you leave behind all your family and the people you know and the things you're comfortable with and the kids away from their school and what they're used to, and they're all here, and we know no one. A few of you I know I've talked to you are new to this area, and I'm sure you're experiencing the same thing. And when I found this place, I went, oh, thank God. Oh, it's so nice to be surrounded by like-minded people. And Chris Eagle said to me, he's covering up, going, what did I say? He said to me, well, Victoria, there's a lot of places you can go and be surrounded by like-minded people. But here at Unity Center of Peace, you get to be surrounded by positive-minded, open-hearted people. You see the difference? Right? Thank you, my brother. He ain't heavy. I never forgot it. I never forgot it. So when we choose connection, we're not choosing to ignore our differences. I just want to be clear. And if you're talking with somebody who has a point of view that might be harmful for people, you certainly, don't need to hang out with that person. And it is important to stand up for what you believe in and speak out when you see something wrong. Definitely. But we never want to close down our heart. We want to keep our heart opening. So when we choose connection, again, we're not choosing to erase our differences or even, pretend that they don't exist. We are choosing to see the higher self within that person, even though we disagree completely. That's a conscious choice, right? It's a conscious choice. So the last evening that Dana and I were in Iceland, we spent a few days in Iceland. That last night before we left, we were at a restaurant, and a couple of people sat down next to us and started talking. And it turned out they're from Tennessee. And you could tell by the accent. And they were great people. And we got to talking, and they were like world travelers. And we were, talking about traveling. They were much more adventurous than us. They were talking about all kinds of things that were really interesting. And we were comparing notes and sharing things. We got this rapport going, and we're talking. And they had just come back from a couple of nights on the south coast. And the south coast of Iceland is wild. This is where the geysers are, and the lava fields, and what's the ice thing? The glaciers. The glaciers. And then, you're driving vast distances, and you see these expansive fields of hills, beautiful green hills with sheep grazing. And horses, Icelandic horses, they're unique horses, and they're very sturdy because they all have these big coats because they have to survive those winters, right? And so they were talking about this place that they were staying at, and were remarking on what a great restaurant they had there. Like in the middle of nowhere, they had this great restaurant. And we're like, oh, really? And they said, yes, and they served horse. I know. And I was like, oh, and they ate it. And they said, oh, it was so delicious. And oh, God, Dana and I were so disgusted. I was like so tempted to just stop and turn. I was tempted to say, well, I think human beings probably taste good too, but you don't eat them. Why would you eat ours? But I didn't. I didn't say it. I instead changed the conversation really quickly. And, okay, this is a difference of opinion, right? Whether it's okay to eat horse or not. A difference of opinion. And I could have chose to close down my heart. And I took a moment and I said, wait a second. Don't close down. You just had this wonderful rapport going, this wonderful conversation. Just shift it. And so I shifted it, and then we got back on track and started talking about things that we had in common, and, we got back to that wonderful energy. And, would I go to these people's houses for dinner? Probably not. But I wouldn't mind kind of catching up with them the next time we travel, because they really are very knowledgeable about all kinds of things, and they were terrific people. Anyway, this is a very small example of what I'm talking about here. On the larger end of the scale, remember a couple weeks ago I talked about Archbishop Desmond Tutu and how, he lived through apartheid in South Africa, and he ended up heading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was enormously successful. And he talked about, and I was sharing, how he was so moved every time someone would come up and share their stories and offer forgiveness to their, abuser, and, open these open hearts. He was so moved. And he said of that time, where am I? He said, my humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together. My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together, which is kind of that Ubuntu philosophy, if you've heard of that African Ubuntu, which is, I am who I am because of you. So to have this, to say this in, this time in this country that was so torn apart by oppression and violence and division, he had a deeper understanding that our humanity and really our divinity is all tied up together. It's all bound up together. And then he had the courage to suggest forgiveness and to suggest reconnection. So that's, kind of the extreme end of what's possible when we keep our heart open and connect. So spiritual practice is not about trying to convince somebody else that you're right. It's about changing your heart position towards that person. So I'd like to try a little mini experience of this, if you're willing. And if you are, just take a moment and close your eyes and take a deep breath and bring someone to mind that thinks very differently than you. Maybe it's somebody who you were once close and no longer. Maybe you've closed them out. Maybe it's somebody you've avoided for a while. And just notice how it feels when you picture them. And now move your focus to your heart center. Move your focus to your heart center. Imagine looking at this person through the heart of spirit. Breathe. So instead of hearing their words and their actions, you're seeing the bright light of their divine presence glowing within them. That same divine presence that is within you is within them. And through your heart, you can focus on seeing it glowing within that person. Doesn't mean you agree with them. It means you're choosing to see their higher self. And if you would like, you can affirm with me gently. You could softly say these words after me to this person. The Christ in me sees the Christ in you. I honor the light of the divine that you are. We are one in spirit. We are one in spirit. Okay. Take a deep breath and open your eyes. Come on back. How does that feel? You feel a shift a bit? Feel it in your body? Yeah. There's a Sufi teaching that says God created differences so that life would not be boring. And that so love would have something to do. So love would have something to do. Oh, it's an activity. It's a power that we can activate in our lives. And Lord knows we don't live in boring times. Love has a lot to do. So rather than seeing our differences as obstacles, we can see them as opportunities to allow that love to do its sacred work through and as us. I'm allowing love to do its sacred work through and as me. Let's say that together. I am allowing love to do its sacred work through and as me. Right. Okay, so I've come up with some ideas about how we can practice this, because this takes practice, right, in our lives. And if I could have the first slide, we'll go to the first idea. Listen to understand, not to reply. So how many times are we in conversation and we think we're listening to somebody, but we're really talking to ourselves about how we're going to respond, how we're going to come back to that, right? We're busy thinking. Spiritual connection invites us to listen differently. Not to agree and not to prepare our comeback, just to understand. Just to understand the human story that's behind the words, which we'll expand on in the second one with the next slide. This is about look for the shared need behind the words. Every person, no matter how different, is seeking the same thing. safety, love, belonging. We're all craving connection. So whether that person, is expressing that need through kindness, or maybe they're expressing it in ways that we would say are kind of negative. Still true. And when we remember that, we can no longer see them as the other. We can now see them as somebody who's just trying to navigate their way through the world, this upside down human dimension, just like we are. Okay? The next slide is a firm willingness. Okay, so admittedly, this is difficult. This is not easy to do, right? So sometimes we're just not ready to connect, and that's okay. But we can kind of slide into our willingness. Slide into the back window with the willingness. And willingness is part of our power of will, which is one of our 12 powers. The power of willingness. And we can affirm our willingness here, right? I activate my willingness. I open to my higher self so I can see the divine presence in this person. I affirm a release of my defensiveness. And then grace takes over, begins to flow where the ego cannot go. I heard that line recently. It's become my favorite. Grace takes over, begins to flow where our ego cannot go. True. Okay, so the next one is practice compassionate boundaries. So let's be clear, right? This connection does not mean tolerating any kind of abuse or harm or compromising your values in any way. We can focus on someone's higher self and still say, you know what, this conversation is not healthy for me right now, and turn away. So that healthy boundary helps us to stay centered in love, and also, honor our own well-being. Healthy boundaries. All right. So we're talking about this is spiritual maturity. This is growing into spiritual maturity. A giant leap forward into this. So it takes practice. It takes a willingness to do this. But boy, if we can see beyond our differences and other opinions and things that we don't necessarily like, and we can focus on the divine self of that person, focus on the divine self of all people, then we become the peacemakers, the healers, the lamplighters. And we live into our vision, right? We live into our vision, which is we envision the divine light awakening in all. That's how we live into it. So let's affirm together on our last slide. Take a deep breath from this space, this spaciousness in your heart that's been created here. And together, I open my heart to divine connection. I see the divine presence in every person. Love unites us even when our minds disagree. And so it is. Namaste. Hi, it's Reverend Victoria here. I'm at Unity Center of Peace with our house band, Bright Matter.
Hello.
Yeah, and if this video has inspired you or empowered you or opened your heart, opened your consciousness, or even just given you hope, we ask that you support what we're doing here by making a donation today, going to unitychapelhill.org or clicking the link below. And we thank you.
Thank
Thank you.